You need at least 3,000 headshots in Call of Duty Black Ops 6 if you want to unlock Dark Matter, which is the multiplayer mastery camo. And many of you guys probably feel like you are struggling to land those headshots, that this camo grind is going to take you forever. But I've got 9 tips that should not only help you get more headshots, but also just improve your aim in general in Call of Duty. Now, I'm not going to be covering any settings in this video because I already have an in-depth controller and mouse and keyboard settings video. So if you haven't watched those yet, I'd recommend you do that first and then come back to this video when you're done. Also, I'm streaming the majority of my camo grind on both YouTube and Twitch, so feel free to drop into a stream and ask me questions there as well. And if you want to stay up to date on the best Call of Duty settings, guides to improve, best loadouts, tips, and much more, be sure that you're subscribed and turn your notifications on so that you don't miss out. So tip number 1 is all about our crosshair centering. Now, most of you guys already know what good centering is, but in case you don't, this just means keeping our center dot or our crosshairs or where we're aiming at normally about chest level of where enemies are going to be. And then as we go through buildings like this, we're going to keep that center dot in the area of where enemies are likely to come from. So usually like in the center of a doorway, down the center of hallways. As we come around corners, we kind of go around the apex of that corner and we keep it right where we need to be. That way, when an enemy pops out, all we got to do is aim and we don't have to adjust our aim too much from there. Now, a quick tip would be to go to your interface settings, go over to gameplay HUD up top and then down to crosshair, hit the show more button, turn your center dot scale either to larger or largest because this just makes it bigger and a little bit easier to see and visualize. And then also, if you want, you can change your crosshair color from white to a brighter color like green, blue, or pink. And again, this just helps us visualize it and it helps us focus on that good centering. But when it comes to headshots, we want to intentionally center high. Normally chest level is what we want, but for headshots, we want to intentionally go much higher than normal. And this map Stakeout, which is on the Face Off playlist, is really good because the entire map is one level. So it's very easy for us to run through this entire map and just keep our crosshair at that same level because everyone's head should pretty much always be at the same spot. However, tip number 1 might have a caveat with tip number 2, and that is to know your gun's recoil pattern. So for example, the AK-74, it's got a decent amount of vertical recoil kick to it. So with a gun like this, it might make more sense where we don't necessarily want to center all the way at the head, but maybe closer to chest or even like neck height, and then let that recoil kick up into the head so that that final bullet is becoming a headshot ideally. But this is going to depend on a lot of things like your skill level, your recoil control, and maybe just how you have the gun built as well. So you will have to play around some with finding kind of that natural aiming start point. This brings us into tip number 3 though, which is a short and simple one, and that is aim higher than you think. It seems like this game is pretty picky on what they consider to be a headshot and what they don't. In my experience, headshots seem to only count like eye level and up, like even you got to hit the forehead sometimes. So if you're hitting kind of in this like lower jaw area, it's just not registering as a headshot, and it's so frustrating. So basically what you need to do is intentionally aim at the very top half of their head. And unfortunately, this is going to lead to you probably missing more shots than you normally would, maybe even losing some gunfights you shouldn't. But doing this method and really focusing on hitting that very top half is going to be more efficient for you in actually landing those headshots if your main goal is to hit that mastery camo. Tip number 4 is less to do with aiming itself, but what game mode we choose to play, which depends on what gun we're working on. Now, the playlist might change by the time you're watching this video, but currently the Face Off Mosh Pit playlist features much smaller maps, which means more engagements and more chances for headshots. The map Stakeout, that one I showed at the beginning, is probably the best for headshots since the entire map is just one level vertically. So back to tip number 1, we can just focus at keeping our centering at that headshot level. Some of you guys also might prefer to play hardcore, especially when it comes to hitting headshots. So if you go to the find a match, hit filter, you can hit R1 and go over to hardcore, and there's actually a hardcore face-off mosh pit. So you would uncheck every mode except you would check the hardcore face-off mosh pit, and then you're going to get hardcore on those small maps. And for certain guns like pistols or semi-auto ARs, it's really good to do hardcore. It just makes it easier, but it's kind of personal preference on which mode you prefer. For me, I like to do regular face-off, or for bigger guns like snipers, marksman rifles, I would play just regular core. The modes that I have checked here, Dom, Hardpoint, Control, and Kill Confirmed, tend to be my personal favorites. I would definitely stay away from modes like Kill Order and Search and Destroy. As for camo grinding, those are just not the best options. Tip number 5, it is a good rule of thumb to not fixate on just one gun at a time, where you're like, I'm gonna get this gun to gold and nothing else in the meantime. Because let's say you're working on on maybe the XM4 AR, but Stakeout pops up on my rotation. It's a super small map. Well, that's a really good map to do SMGs or especially shotguns. But when a slightly larger map pops up, then you work on your ARs, LMGs, or snipers. Now, shotguns specifically are very frustrating when it comes to landing headshots. With those specifically, I found that aiming down sight instead of hip firing tends to be a bit better and only even bother with shotguns on the really small maps like Stakeout. You can also spam smoke grenades or even flashes and stuns, and that can kind of disorient everyone, allowing you to get up close and try to get headshots. Also, if you unlock slugs for either of the shotguns, building them for ADS and then with slugs and kind of treating it like a close range sniper is much better and more consistent for headshots compared to the normal pellets. The problem is you have to unlock and level up those guns pretty high until you get slugs, so it's just a frustrating thing to deal with. Tip number 6 has to do with our play style, and when it comes to landing headshots, it's generally easier to play a bit slower and just hold angles in lanes that enemies tend to come through. Once you find a good spot, ideally on like a head glitch that has some really good cover where you can barely expose your own body, you can pre-aim right at where the enemy's heads will be, again referring back to tip number 1, and as they come through the lane, you just pop, hit him in the head, easy peasy. Obviously, this method is not going to work with shotguns, and it's going to be a lot harder on SMGs. You can still do it, but we need to get up much closer in the action and kind of sit around corners or aim walk into small areas with those types of guns. But even with the SMGs and shotguns, it's way more efficient to just play slow and kind of ADS everything than run around like a maniac. Tip number 7 revolves around how we build our loadouts, especially when it comes to the optics. So even on the smaller maps, I've personally found that slightly more zoomed optics, anywhere from 1.5 even up to 4x, just makes it a lot easier to focus on landing those headshots and not accidentally hit body shots. So for the ARs, my favorite has actually been this Jason Armory 2X. The 4Xs aren't bad as well. There is a really nice 3X that you unlock for the XM4 that I just haven't used yet. I used it back in the beta and loved it. Or even the 1.5Xs are nice as well, even on SMGs. And when it comes to SMGs, unless you have iron sights that are really clean, like for example the C9, you generally still want to use at least a 1X optic, because having that nice and clear sight picture just makes it easier to really visualize and focus on hitting the headshots. And for the rest of the build, I like to try to focus on horizontal recoil the most. The vertical foregrip is a great attachment because it really smooths out the gun, and having some of that vertical recoil can be good because it tends to push your gun up towards the headshot. The other thing is, if you haven't unlocked the CHF barrel, which is on most guns, it increases our headshot damage. So this is kind of a no-brainer. The only downside is it gives it a lot more recoil. So if it is too much for you, building it more for low recoil is going to be smarter than maxing out the damage generally. Tip number 8 is to use the 3 blue perks to get the Recon Specialty perk. So a new feature in Black Ops 6 is that when you use 3 perks of the same color, you get an extra specialty perk. The red ones are going to give you basically quick fix. The green ones give you basically extra XP when completing the objective, which is nice for leveling, but not necessarily for camo grinding per se. But the blue ones, they're going to give you basically wall hacks every time you spawn in for about a full second. And on the smaller face-off maps, especially Stakeout, this helps a ton with figuring out exactly where people are. And if you're playing hardcore, you can actually use this to wall bang people, and people will legit think you're hacking. Okay, for our final tip number 9, it's going to actually be a quick aim drill or aim warm-up that I try to do almost every day. So go to the find a match, go down to private match, then hit create private match. Under your weapons, I would recommend just making like an overkill loadout and just putting some larger magazines on your gun. In the game setup tab, change this to free for all, change the map. Ideally, I think Babylon is going to be best if we want to practicing our headshots and just general aim, but feel free to go with a bigger map, especially if you want to work on something like sniping specifically. For game rules, you can turn the time limit and score limit up to as much or as little as you'd like. For the max health, nothing wrong with leaving this to 100. I personally like to turn mine up to about 200 though, because it just forces me to hit more shots. I like to turn health regen up, turn radar always on, but that is a personal preference. Now, a lot of people might be thinking, oh, we should definitely turn headshots only on because it'll force me to hit headshots. The problem with this is that you can still hit below the body and it's just gonna register as nothing. So I think it's actually better to leave this off and make sure when you're getting kills, it's registering as a headshot in the kill feed. Because if you leave it on, it's basically saying it's okay for you to hit below. I just don't like it as much. I think it's better to leave it off and focus on hitting headshots. And then you can also turn your score streaks off. And then go over to the side here, hit the plus button, and then add bots. I would do the max 11 personally, but you could do less if you want. Recruit bots, they don't move around much and they're pretty easy, but the regular bots move around a little bit more and they're a tad more realistic and is going to be better for practicing our aim. And then if you guys have been watching me for a while, you probably know my daily aim warm-up that I always do, where I will go in and I will turn my aim assist to off for this. And then I will normally kill about 50 bots shots or so with aim assist off. But again, for this, we're gonna focus on going for headshots specifically, and we can check in that bottom left corner of the kill feed if we're getting headshots. Again, feel free to make it headshots only if you want, but I just think it's better to leave it to headshots off. And again, I'm just gonna focus on hitting headshots. It is hard. You're gonna struggle. That is okay. Once you've done a few bots, as little or as many as you want, you can then go back, turn your aim assist back on, get a feel for it with aim assist on, especially at closer ranges, because aim assist is definitely different in this game than how it was in MW3, especially at close ranges. So get a feel for the aim assist, do some with aim assist off and aim assist on. And if you do this just for like 5 minutes before you play, it will make a massive difference to your aim. One other final option you can do as well, if you don't want to kind of waste time in a private match, is you can go into zombies, also turn your aim assist off if you're a controller player, and just focus on hitting the critical shots there. It's just a more low-key but decent way that you can kind of practice, especially if you're just new to the game and you're kind of struggling to get the feel for it. Alrighty guys, that is going to wrap things up. If you found this video helpful, please leave a like, drop a comment, and share this with your friends. Don't forget to subscribe if you're new. Come say hi in a stream as well, and we will see you guys in the next one.